Went back to the brick house today. Man, a lot going on. We're going to review that in what happened yesterday between Trump, Zelenskyy, and these European leaders. I'm going to give you the reason why I'm in favor of redistricting, which has very little to do with what Texas is doing. If we had just left Texas alone, this wouldn't be such a conversation. And you could have had Republicans saying, no, that's not for us. It all changed. And I will explain why. I'm Tony Katz. The show is Tony Katz today. Smoke them if you got them. Let's go do the thing. The radio show. Let's go. The question before us is what constitutes success? And in the case of Trump's meeting yesterday with Vladimir Zelenskyy, with European leaders, well, you would argue that the deal is success. But that's to somehow dismiss the very concept of what it takes to get there. Tony Katz today. Good to be with you. Find everything over at TonyKatz.com. President Trump speaking about it this morning on Fox and Friends.
President Putin said, no NATO. And you said, you know, we're just going to take that off the table. But you did get President Putin to agree to NATO-like protections. So tell us about that. What does that entail?
Well, the war really started over NATO and Crimea. And they wanted Crimea back. That was given, not a shot fired by President Obama in perhaps the worst real estate deal I've ever seen. There's been a couple of them. I would say the Gaza Strip was a pretty bad one, too, given by Israel so they'd have peace. So they gave away a big percentage of their oceanfront property in order to have peace. How did that work out? Not so good. And Crimea is the apple of Ukraine. I mean, it's so beautiful. And Obama gave it away. Nobody ever mentions that. If I ever did that, the fake news would be, they would be writing about me day and night for years. He gave it away. He demanded that they let it go. And Russia came in and took it, just took it like from a candy from a baby. And it was really Obama's, not really, I mean, that was pure and simple, Obama's fault. What a terrible thing he did to that country. And so they lost their heart. They lost the heart and soul of the Ukraine 14 years ago, whatever it might be. And it was so unnecessary to do that. And that's when it really began, when Obama gave it away. And then
I would argue it's not that he gave it away. It's that Russia took it and Obama said, huh. I mean, that's what happened. He didn't say, "Way, hey, you guys," or whoa, what are you doing here? Nope. He just went about pushing whatever nonsense he was pushing at the time. I don't even recall. It was all a bad dream. I'm hoping we undo every part of it. By the way, he was President Trump's totally right about Israel in 2005, giving Gaza to the Palestinians. Ripping Jews out of their homes. They were screaming, they were crying, they were begging, don't do this. Happened. You cannot give land to people who want to destroy you. Palestinians then voted for Hamas, and the rest, as they say, is evil, bloody history. Regardless of how things started with the Russians and Ukraine, we're here now. And what we have now is the Russians having 70% plus in areas of Donetsk and Luhansk and Zaporizhia and Kherson. This land bridge to Crimea, which allows this openness to the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. What is it that will get the Russians to stop? Well, this is the first conversation we've ever had where the discussion of land came into play. We saw that people were talking about it. We certainly have heard the reporting that the Europeans have introduced this idea. There is going to be a giving up of land. That's going to happen. But what is it that someone gets for this. This is one of the things that has been the back and forth conversation of will he, won't he, meaning Trump and certainly you can argue of European nations regarding this idea of a peacekeeping force. When President Trump was asked about this in the Oval Office meeting with Vladimir Zelenskyy, he said, well, that's what we're going to discuss in the meeting, meaning the meeting with Macron, Meloni of Italy, van der Leyen of the European Commission, Stubb of Finland. And people are like, why are the Finns in this meeting?
We might come from a small country, but we have a long border with Russia, over 800 miles. And we, of course, have our own historical experience with Russia from World War II, the Winter War and the War of Continuation. And if I look at the silver lining of where we stand right now, we found a solution in 1944, and I'm sure that we'll be able to find a solution in 2025 to end Russia's war of aggression and find and get a lasting and just peace.
That has to happen to people giving things up and accepting things, and Putin giving things up and accepting things. That we were discussing whether or not this means a peacekeeping force. What does that look like? What is the purpose of that? We've already known that if we're going to be engaged in control of rare earth minerals and we're going to be getting mineral rights and we're going to be doing work in the area, we're going to protect our people. Americans are going to protect American interests, and there's just no possibility at all in any way, shape, or form of accepting the idea of Russia engaging in some kind of attack. It can't be a drone attack on Kyiv if there are Americans working in Kyiv. That's not going to work. That can't be the way it goes, because Russia would have to pay a very, very steep price. Because Trump would pay the steep price politically. Oh, great. Now we've got American troops out there, or American forces out there, American something out there, because you just wouldn't leave this thing alone. You had to stay involved in it. And now Americans are getting killed. This is all your fault. So you got to keep the Russians from doing such a thing. And you got to be very, very rough on that. But if you put Americans on the ground in any way, you are saying that Americans are there to keep the peace. We are the deterrent. Well, seems that European nations are okay with being this deterrent as well. But they know that in order for the deterrent to actually have more teeth, Ukraine has to give something up to sweeten the deal. To just be a deterrent for the sake of being the deterrent is the war footing that very obviously Europe never wanted. Certainly America doesn't want. But if some land goes along with it, oh, well, now we're just making a deal. Now all we're doing is making a deal. And if you know anything about President Trump, you know that a deal can always be made. By the way, he said as much. He said the words in the meeting.
President Zelenskyy, you say in the Post-Times today, Russia must end this war, which it itself started. President Trump, you say President Zelenskyy of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to. Which is it?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think we're going to have a meeting. I think if everything works out well today, we'll have a trilat. And I think there will be a reasonable chance of ending the war when we do that.
And, is this the end of the road for American support for Ukraine? Is today's meeting deal or no deal?
I can never say that. It's never the end of the road. People are being killed, and we want to stop that. So I would not say it's the end of the road. No,
it's not the end of the road. I could never say that it's deal or no deal. Why is that? Well, we've been talking about this now for years. If you were part of the morning show, you heard me say this back in 2016, 2017. If you're new to the show, welcome. I'm Tony Katz. How are you? There are two rules of Trumpism. These are the two rules of Trumpism. The first rule of Trumpism is Trump wins. The second rule of Trumpism is that a deal can always be made as long as it adheres to the first rule of Trumpism. There's always room for a deal, boo-boo. There's always an opportunity because any deal can be spun. If the deal works, look what I did. If the deal doesn't work, look what they did. I'm sorry, are we not being honest about what it is we're seeing, doing, experiencing, and who we're dealing with? And by the way, what would make anybody think that a deal lasts forever? It's the weirdest thing in the world where you have the political left thinking that somehow there is a deal to be made that lasts forever. Really, what they say is, well, we got to be tough with Russia. You're not being tough enough with Russia. Yet no one, not a single progressive, has advocated for sending in 50,000 troops and shooting Russians in the skull. And until they do, maybe they can sit down and be quiet and let somebody else try and get something done. If Trump can get Putin to accept less land and get Ukraine to give up some land, don't get me wrong, it sucks. But that's going to lead to the force. And that force is going to spend a lot of time in Ukraine for a lot of years to come to keep Russia at bay, which is exactly what Europe wants, which is why Europe, understanding that the president is not going to move on the idea of, oh, yeah, we'll just put American forces in there like somehow this was 1996, so we'll take care of you all. Don't worry about it. Just go back to hating us and not paying your fair share into NATO. See what I did? I utilized their fair share argument against them. Oh, gosh, that felt so good. We're not going back to that. The Europeans have figured this out. You know, I just played the president of Finland. Never forget that Finland wasn't even a member of NATO until 2023. They for forever have stayed out of NATO. Why? 800-mile border. They literally don't want to poke the bear. But seeing that Joe Biden was incompetent, and what happens if you elect an American president who isn't willing to do the hard work, incapable like Joe Biden, you better be prepared yourself. Join NATO. Yeah, you might need a friend. You might need a buddy. You might need a pal if Putin is what we know him to be, an expansionist power. So we have this meeting. We have the second meeting. And what we have is the opportunity for this trilateral bit of conversation. I still don't know how this isn't going to lead to some type of American force mixed in with the NATO force. The ambassador to NATO, Matt Whitaker.
Ultimately, the American people have already given over $300 billion to Ukraine to support its economy, to support its war efforts. You know, we are now have this mechanism that I'm helping coordinate where American arms and ammunition are being sold to our European NATO allies, plus Canada, and those are being provided to Ukraine. And we've so far we've completed billions of dollars of those transactions. It does not make America any less strategically strong, but it does help Ukraine defend itself. And so that was an important step. I think that's one of the reasons that Vladimir Putin's at the table. You know, the security guarantees, those were the topic yesterday, what each country was willing to do and provide. Certainly European troops in Ukraine, ultimately after the war ends and we have a peace deal, is on the table. President Trump has said that the United States will be part of that coalition, but at the same time, he has not committed to American troops being there. But there are certain capabilities, especially on the command and control and other capabilities that only the United States of America can provide. It's why most countries in the world want to be our ally. And among other things, being the largest economy and the strongest, most powerful military are a couple other reasons. But you know, certainly the coalition, the willing, and the security guarantees are crucial for Ukraine. And at the same time, Putin conceding that on Friday, I think, was a big step towards peace.
So, where does this put us? I think the only proper answer is we don't know. What we know is these people on the left screaming Trump failed this and Trump failed that and Trump's playing into Putin's hand and Putin's playing Trump like a puppet. These are the worst, most awful, daft, ignorant people out there. They're not worthy of your time, and you should call them damn fools, including that cousin of yours. You know the cousin. We all hate that cousin. We don't know where it's going to lead. Here's what we know. For the first time, there's a real conversation about what it's going to take to make this stop. Not, well, we'll give them this. Not, well, we'll give them that. And maybe it's just a question of they've both gone on long enough dying that they want this. They want it to end. Not 100% sure what it is that Putin actually wants. What I know is yesterday's meetings mattered. They count. They had value. Is it going to lead to something perfect? I don't know. It's going to lead to anything that works. But it's all a step in a direction, a far greater step than anything Biden ever gave. Anything. And we should be rational people and hope that it works. And hope that it works in a way that does not harm Americans, which is, of course, what we would want. But if you ask me, do I think America is going to be involved? I'll bet money on that one. Keep it here. I'm Tony Katz. This is Tony Katz Today. Welcome back. Tony Katz. Tony Katz Today. Guys, silly little earpiece right here. I'm trying to be as sober as I can be about the situation. Not sober, sober, like focused on what really counts when we talk about what is possible in a peace deal and what does it mean for us? Where do Americans fit into this situation? It's so obvious that what the left is doing here, whether it's MSNBC or MS Now, CNN, the Twitter trolls, there's no idea, no philosophy of engagement and discussion and, well, this, maybe that, don't like this, could like that, let's see. Everybody's so desperate to have an immediate answer, an immediate reaction. Here's what it is. I don't know what it is yet. What I know is I've got more options today than I did a week ago. I had possibilities, but now I've got options. I've got a real discussion going on, and it's a very obvious discussion going on. Shouldn't we celebrate that? Shouldn't we say that's good? These people won't do it. The left is amongst the most awful, no, not amongst, they're the most awful group of people. They're apologists for the evil, and they despise anything that could be good. As Evan Sayet notes, they are 180 degrees diametrically opposed to the truth, and I would argue to decency. They are who they are. So I just want to bring I don't have all the answers. I don't think everything's perfect. But here's what we know from it, for sure. For sure. And Libertarian, good to see you, man. Good to see you. Glad you're here.
Second reason is climate change. It means that Chicago's working class communities are experiencing more and more frequent 100-year storms and extreme weather. We need to build more climate resilient infrastructure, plant more trees to absorb water, and modernize our infrastructure to account for this new reality.
Allow me to give you the new reality, Mayor Johnson of Chicago. You're weird. Oh, and a bigot. So you look, you could be one or the other. You could be weird or you could be a bigot. You can't be both. No, that's not true. Usually it goes hand in hand, doesn't it? Tony Katz today. Good to be with you. The storms are not climate change. We've been through this. And a hurricane heading for the Carolinas is not affecting you in Chicago, you weirdo. You know what is? The 16-year-olds killing 15-year-olds. That's affecting you, and that has nothing to do with climate change. But don't worry, you'll explain, pretend that it is. You'll somehow decide that it is. First, the bigotry of Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, his hatred of people who are white, his hatred of people who are white. I said that twice because it's just that much hatred. It's obvious and clear. Like Lori Lightfoot, they had the opportunity to do something better. They chose nah, and they suffer. And now such a progressive, we're talking about climate change. This argument doesn't move anybody. Although there is this concept of climate anxiety. Have you heard this? Producer Landon, you are of a Gen Z generation. Have you ever heard any of your friends talking about climate anxiety? Okay. Have you heard anybody ever mention climate anxiety? Other than Kamala's stepdaughter? No, correct. Right. She has the climate anxiety. Well, then good. It's not happening because, if it's not happening, Producer Landon, it's not happening. Right? Yeah, whether we're talking about climate or his love life, it is not happening to Producer Landon. I have no idea if that's true. I don't ask those kinds of questions. Things Tony doesn't ask for 40 bajillion about Landon's personal life. That is not where I want to. Nope. No, don't ask. I'm not going to do it. Well, just because you're like, oh, now you want to know? You DM him yourself. Slide on in there. See what happens. See how it goes. Right there. Right? Maybe he'll give you some climate anxiety. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work out. I know that this from the mayor of Chicago is just silliness. When you can't tackle the issues in front of you, when you can't make your city safe, when you can't engage in growth, when you can't bring down the tax burden, when you can't create a better life for people, you better have something to blame. You better have a way to scare them. You see, I'm told that Trump talks about all these other things because he wants to distract from Epstein, but we're all still talking about Epstein. Look at all what I mentioned, and Brandon Johnson's talking about climate anxiety, trying to distract from the fact that Chicago is not livable, which is too bad because it's a great city. Keep it here. This is Tony Katz today. I'll be hearing from Landon's parents in no time. So, yeah, just going back to the Ukraine-Russia deal. By the way, no, Greta Thunberg never ended up in jail in Gaza. She was immediately put on a plane back home where she was given multiple meals and water. And the best part, the seat was directly in front of the bathroom, so she couldn't recline. That's a true story. True story. So help me. So help me. Right there. It's we don't know how it's going to work out, and it's okay. And people who are going to scream, well, he didn't do this. Well, this isn't accomplished. You live in the real world. You can't always make a proclamation, this is the way it is, and other nations are going to be like, absolutely, whatever you say. It's not the way it works. Not the way it works. So with that, I leave it there. I leave that conversation there. I'm going to get into redistricting. We still have, where is that still on? White House press briefing today? Oh, that's going to be fun. We've got the White House press briefing going on today. I will bring that to you. And let me make sure I've done my work here. Beautiful and perfection. Yep. All right. Cigars are all set up for the event. Coming from Blend Bar Cigar. They will be setting up. Looking forward to that. That is this Saturday. Tickets.tonykatz.com. If you haven't gotten your tickets yet, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you're waiting for. Tickets.tonykatz.com. Get them today. Get your tickets. My gosh. Tickets.tonykatz.com. Just that easy. All right. Oh, you will. Producer Landon will be there. Myself, actor Nick Searcy from Hollywood to the Heartland. It's going to be such a good night of bourbon and barbecue and stories. Can I tell you that somebody I'm always on Facebook Marketplace during breaks. This is actually a real thing with me. I'm always taking a look at stuff. Someone is selling a 2008 Land Rover SE Sport, 135,000 miles, $7,500. Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know if that is bad. Is that bad or is that good? 7,500. 2008. Looks like it's in good shape. I don't know. Do I want a Land Rover? I do work with a local car dealership here in Indianapolis called Andy Moore Ford. And so I drive Fords, and right now I'm driving the Bronco, and it's excellent. I've enjoyed the daylights out of that vehicle. So I'm not necessarily in the market for anything, but I can be convinced. I can be convinced. So other repairs. Yeah, it's always a repair. It's not my style. I don't know. It could be my style. I think I could learn to love that style. Right? That's just my take. I think I could learn to love it. So that's okay. That's a no. From the guy from General Motors. That's a no. Funny. Let's fight. I am going to make the case for redistricting. And I want it known that I accept the fact that not everybody agrees with me. I can accept the fact that some people think that it's just rank politics. I hear you. But I want to make sure we're all talking about the same game. There has never been a time where the expression, don't hate the player, hate the game, has never been more factual. Let me make my case. Then we can discuss it. Tony Katz today. Good to be with you. 833-468-8669. 833-GOT-TONY. Can I use the text thing there, Producer Landon? Can I use the text thing that we've got going on? Like, it does work. Like, I'm on it. I think so I've got the chat room. The live stream is happening, right? On YouTube, Tony Katz, on Twitter, X, Tony Katz, Facebook, Tony Katz Radio. But if you text 317-239-9393, I think I see the text. Right? Is that how it works? So I think that's it. You text, do you have to text? I don't know. I think it's supposed to work. Anyway, allow me. This starts with a story about Texas. And we know the basic story. Texas decides that they are going to do a mid-decade redistricting, right? A redistricting comes after the census. You determine what your population is. Representation in Congress is based on that. You then redistrict. Maybe you gain a seat. Maybe you lose a seat. Maybe you have the same number of seats. You're allowed to move some things around. Boom, it's done. You don't do it again for another 10 years. Standard operating procedure. Sometimes a redistricting happens in the middle of a decade, right? A census is every 10 years. That's a decade. Happens in the middle of the decade. Mid-decade redistricting. Rare, but does happen. Illegal? Absolutely not. Immoral? Zero. It is a political process that a party in power can utilize. Republicans are the party in power in Texas. They believe they have reasons for redistricting. And one of those reasons is that the census may not have been perfectly accurate. They see that things should be done a little differently, whatever their reasons are. The legislature can do this. They are well within their rights. The people who have a say on whether or not they like it or don't like it are the people of Texas. They can vote out members of the legislature. Someone said to me, well, if they redraw the lines, you won't be able to vote out your person. These are lines for Congress, and it is done by the state legislature. That's their power. So you could still vote out your state person. And that's the way it should be. A political process where the people who have been elected by the citizens are engaged in a process, and if the citizens don't like it, the citizens can remove them. That's it. Now, you live in another state. You don't like the thing. Well, that's fine. That's totally fine. No problem. You don't have to like it. But somebody could look at what's happening in Texas and say, that's interesting to try over here. Maybe we should be looking at that. That does happen. And certainly there has been a push for Indiana to do this. J.D. Vance, the vice president, came to Indiana to speak with the governor, Mike Braun, former senator, and elected officials here. There has been national conversations about Indiana. Why aren't you doing this already? The president told you he wants it done. One of those came from Charlie Kirk. And I would say to Charlie Kirk, I don't know, Charlie, that's not the way to approach the people here. You approach people in Indiana through the conversation, not through some do what you're told thing. Don't do that. I mean, nothing's going to stop you. You'll do whatever you want to do. You're after maybe a different audience. I am after the discussion of why this matters. When the conversation came to Indiana, I said out loud, Indiana, we have 9 congressional seats. 7 of them are held by Republicans. 1 is held by Democrat Andre Carson in what's known as the 7th District in the capital, Indianapolis. The other one is held by a Democrat named Frank Mervan near Chicago, right? So top northwest corner. You got 7 of 9. I really don't think this is the state for it. There are probably other states for this redistricting. So I left it there. I didn't pay any more attention to it. And I think that the vast majority of people would have paid no more attention to it. But the political left, at all times and in all cases and in all ways, overplays their hand. And we should be honest with ourselves and honest with our Democrat friends. And I know there are plenty of people on the political left who listen. You could not have looked worse with this escape to Illinois insanity. Texas Democrats in the legislature who didn't want to have to vote regarding redistricting said, we can deny the Republicans a quorum, we'll escape to Illinois, we'll hang out, and they won't be able to get a quorum. They won't be able to vote. This is what Wisconsin Democrats did, I believe, in 2010. This is what Indiana Democrats did in 2011. This happens. They run away. It's what they do. They looked ridiculous. Yet somehow, Democrats like the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, the leader of the Democrats in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, and others came to Illinois and to support them. And you're doing such important work and you're so brave. They're not brave. They're all losers. Every single Democrat in the Texas House is a loser. Every single Democrat who went to Illinois is a loser who hates democracy. Sometimes you lose. You make your case. You try to persuade, which is the conversation that I believe is important to have, and not the conversation with this top-down, do what I tell you that Charlie Kirk seems to want to put out there. I'm just saying, Charlie, it's not the right approach for Indiana. The Democrats are on the wrong side of everything here. They look like fools. And that could have been enough. But other Democrats were supporting them and making this a story, overplaying their hand. Then Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, he comes from the land of pomade. He says, well, if Texas does this, we are going to redistrict and we're going to wipe out 5 Republican seats. Now, could California do this? Well, they're well within their rights to do this. Any state can engage in redistricting, even a mid-decade redistricting. Of course they can. The question before us is, why are they doing it? Now, the White House seems very intent on redistricting because they're making an argument that the census from 2020 is a bunch of bunk. It's garbage. The census happened during COVID, so people were not answering things properly. The census includes people who are here illegally. Now, the Constitution talks about the idea about the number of people, not the number of citizens. So the left takes this as you can count people who are here illegally. And they want to use that to their advantage. Of course, I think rational people would say, we don't count people who are here illegally. You shouldn't count them for anything. That's crazy. The only time where I favor making sure we count people who are here legally is if we're dealing with vaccines. And you say to me, you want to give them health care? No. I want to, if we're talking about, for example, flu shots, and people can decide whether they take the flu shot or not. I don't want to ask if somebody's a citizen to get the flu shot. I want less flu going around. So if I'm told that the flu shot works, it has efficacy, why wouldn't I want to give it to people regardless of anything having to do with their status? It's safer for the American citizen. I think that's just a rational way to go about things. So the White House talks about you shouldn't count people who are here illegally. The whole census from COVID was a big hot mess. This isn't accurate. The formulation, which is the system that we use, the methods that we use, just like for BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it doesn't work. We need a better system. It is a fine argument as far as I'm concerned. Let someone prove why it isn't. Let them prove why it is. This is what a debate is all about. California is not making that argument. California is not making the Texas argument. What Gavin Newsom is saying is, I believe in retribution. I am such a craven political animal that because the state of Texas has decided to do something, I must engage in retribution for my party, not for the country, not for California, for my party, and take away Republican seats, and that'll teach them. I don't know about you, but I was told when someone acts like a bully, you got to punch the bully in the nose. I've heard that a million times. California is engaging in retribution. Gavin Newsom wants retribution. He wants Democrats to engage in retribution. And there are Democrats out there now supporting this idea of retribution. If Texas does this, we'll make all these changes in our states. And thus, Even if I was on the fence, I'm not sure why the redistricting conversation comes to my state of Indiana. I am now 1,000% in favor of it. Because in a political fight, these people have to lose. This wasn't a political fight. This was Texas making a decision. And Texas could have made the decision, and someone could have said Indiana should do this, and Indiana probably would have just shrugged its shoulders and been like, it's not for us. That's what they would have said. And right now there are Republicans coming out and saying, yeah, I'm not in favor of this. What do you mean you're not in favor of this? You don't even know what you're in favor for or not. I heard Mitch Daniels, the former governor, say he's not in favor of it, with all due respect to Mitch Daniels. And I am a fellow of the Mitch Daniels Leadership Foundation. I believe he's wrong. I have seen members, Republicans, say I'm not in favor of this. I don't think you've thought it through. So the question now comes to something called a special session. You've heard this in your states before. Will the governor, Mike Braun, call a special session to discuss the idea of redistricting? And I believe the only answer is you have to call the session and let people vote. If they don't vote for it, okay. There was a discussion, they didn't vote for it, and now we could talk about that. They don't want to be on the record. I don't care what they want to be on the record for. I'm not interested in their political futures. I'm interested in making sure that the attack dog of Gavin Newsom doesn't get his way. We're in a fight for our lives. And I'm interested in Republicans across the country fighting back. I favor redistricting. Let me know what you think. This is Tony Katz today. Guys, welcome back. Tony Katz, what is up? All right, so any thoughts? Am I crazy? Am I out of my mind? Am I making sense? Once you know the rules of the game your enemy is playing, play by their rules. And this, by the way, I think is the whole point. They did this. You could argue that you don't like what Texas is doing. I don't say no to that. You can argue like, I don't like this. Okay. But it's up to Texas citizens to make a change if they want. Retribution? Nope. Fight like all ever-loving hell. Fight hard. That's my take. That is my take right there. Oh, I'm going to take heat for it. And now in the state of Indiana, there's been conversation about property taxes and a really, really ugly job that Indiana did in property taxes and promising cuts to this and cuts to that, and they didn't do anything. It was really ugly. And so people wanted a special session to address property taxes. And now the argument is, okay, you want to address property taxes, but you'll address this redistricting nonsense? First of all, it's not nonsense. Secondly, they're two different things. And one does not preclude the other. You could still have a conversation about the issue with property taxes. But that doesn't mean that you don't have a conversation about this because the other one isn't being handled. Again, the citizens should vote these people out. But I want to see the special session because I want to see the discussion. Sometimes there's a real weird thing. How much time do I have left, Landon? Okay. Be careful what you wish for because you just might get it. You wanted Trump, you wanted to fight, now you're told, here's how we fight, and you're like, oh, wait, I didn't mean it like that. That's what we're seeing. My take. Let me know what you think. Tony at TonyKatz.com if you want to email me. Let's get back to the show.
People ask me like, oh, Florida, you guys are leading this. You just, how you do it? I was like, as governor of Florida, I get this great cheat code. All I got to do is look to New York, Illinois, California, and then do the opposite.
That right there. Ron DeSantis. How do I govern? Right? I take a look at what California, New York, and Illinois are doing, and I do the opposite. It's like as good as it gets. Right? How do you write women so well? I think of a man, and then I take away logic and reason. That's a good line. It's a good line, and Nicholson delivered it well. He took my advice. He took my advice on that, and for that, I'll be forever flattered. Tony Katz today. Good to be with you. Don't forget to get your tickets.tonykatz.com. Myself and actor producer Nick Searcy from Hollywood to the Heartland. His Hollywood stories, the making of his January 6th documentaries, and why living in the Heartland is better, as we both now do. We've got a White House press briefing that is scheduled to be coming up. So I'm going to share that with you. And did anybody catch this story? If you get my show sheet every day at TonyKatz.com, you did. The story was over at Newsmax about how China is talking about how the reunification with Taiwan is, it should be happening. As a matter of fact, we're ready for it. China saying on Monday it stands ready to work with the greatest effort for peaceful reunification with Taiwan. This was a response to President Trump, who allegedly Trump saying in an interview he did with Fox, telling Xi Jinping that China will not invade Taiwan while Trump's in office. You want to talk about a comment? When I read it last night, that's the oogie feeling right there. That feeling right now in the pit of your stomach, like, I didn't need this. I needed no part of this whatsoever. Whew. There is no peaceful reunification with Taiwan because Taiwan doesn't want it. Can't have peaceful reunification with people who don't want peaceful reunification. The only thing you can do is try and take them by force. That subject is far from done. Find everything at TonyKatz.com. Much more is coming up. Keep it right here and the live stream. It's Tony Katz Today. All right. Exactly. Ask how it went for Hong Kong. Given up by the British as a protectorate in, was it 99? Less than a quarter century later, under the boot of the communists. So that's where we are right there. All right, here is the story. The radio show is in break, so we're going to take the break. We are going to come back to the press briefing. So hang out, smoke them if you got them. And I'm not here to judge. You do what you got to do. And we'll be back. All right? Keep it right here, guys.
all of these leaders that actually came to Washington, D.C. and said what.
Welcome back. Tony Katz. Tony Katz today. Good to be with you. The Brick House right here, Brick House Maduro. I should really do it like that so you kind of see the label. Will it show up? Will it? Yeah, it will. Low cost, high yield. Really a good cigar to have in the humidor that you smoke on the regular. A Brick House, I think, works for every occasion. But like if you want it to be your yard work cigar, that works. If you want it to be just your kind of casual cigar, you wanted a cigar, but you weren't looking to really spend the time getting like really into it and deciphering flavors. You want just something that was enjoyable, a little bigger in the profile. This works, I think, very, very well. If you want to step it up in the dollar price point, that's when I go to Oliva, sometimes pronounced Oliva, and the Milanios. That cigar is an all-weather cigar, works for every occasion. Absolutely every occasion. I think it's fantastic. But this is a really nice stick. Really well done. J.C. Newman, fine work. So we've got the press briefing. You can see that there in the in the corner over there. That's going to be beginning. So we'll see when it gets started. Everybody's in the seat. They had done the stand-ups, and so they're ready to go. So maybe it'll start on time, maybe it won't. We will find out what we find out soon enough. From that, I'm glad you're here. If you don't know me, I'm Tony Katz. The show is Tony Katz Today. Do I have an all-time favorite cigar? Interesting question. The answer is maybe. By the way, I love Crowned Heads. John Huber, that whole team is fantastic. I don't smoke the Jericho. But I think Crowned Heads does great work, and sometimes they're cigars that not everything is for me, but I like them. And the one that never really hit, the Le Patissier as a torpedo, that cigar is fantastic. I would buy it by the box. So good. And they've done a whole rebrand, which I think is just lovely. Anyway, show's got to begin. Let's get to it. The White House press briefing is about to begin. Everybody is assembled in the briefing room. They've got the TVs up and ready to go. Caroline Leavitt should be entering through the sliding blue door at any second. It's going to be a conversation about Ukraine and Russia and the European leaders. It's going to be a conversation about cleaning up D.C. and who they've arrested, who's here illegally. There's going to be a conversation about redistricting that I believe will come from the podium. And then, whatever other madness that Caitlin Collins wants to ask about. Tony Katz today. Good to be with you. 833-468-8669. 833 got Tony. That's how you get to be a part of the show. And of course, we're live streaming on YouTube, Tony Katz, Twitter X, Tony Katz, Facebook, Tony Katz Radio. I'm smoking the Brick House Maduro from J.C. Newman. We were talking about cigars a little bit. I don't really drink during the show. I enjoy sipping bourbon and learning about it much more than I've ever been a drinker, but I try not to do that during the show. But a cigar during the show, yeah, I do that all the time. There is certainly more going on in the world. And one of the questions that I hope comes is this question about Intel. Not intelligence, the company, Intel, where SoftBank is investing $2 billion. And I said to myself, first of all, that's a whole lot of loot. Secondly, why? Why is SoftBank investing in Intel? Intel certainly had some issues, and there's a back and forth to be had about the CHIPS Act, where the CHIPS Act didn't safeguard American chip manufacturing. Rather, it kind of gave rewards for not being successful, as opposed to the very concept of you have to build a better product and you have to build it in a better way. You're Intel. I feel the same way about Boeing. I'm not here to save Boeing. Build a better product and build it in a better way. This is what you have to do. Intel is, I would argue, in the same spot. Now, someone could say to me, hey, Tony, there's some distinct differences. Here's the issue specifically with Intel, having nothing to do with Boeing, of course, for that comparison. And here's why it matters. $2 billion seemed like a tremendous amount of money. And notice it was invests. And I would have said, okay, maybe there's a deal to be made. They needed the infusion of cash. It was better to give it up this way. Fine. But it coincides with a story where the federal government is discussing investing in Intel. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't know what's happening here. I've been through this. What is this, Solyndra all over again? Picking winners and losers? I'm not interested. Stop it. Because if I get told too big to fail one more time in my life, I'm going to lose my head. We want chip manufacturing. I agree. But our job is to save every company that fails to do its job properly. And if there's a bailout every time because something's too big to fail, how the bloody heck do we think they're going to learn and make better chips? By the way, SoftBank is now going to, is Japanese ownership. Just want to make sure that was clear. And that has a level of concern. I want to know that questions are asked about this. I want to hear the questions about this. But the idea that we're going to get involved, well, Tony, we can't let these companies fail. They hire Americans and we need to keep them going. No, they need to keep them going. I find it stunning to think that somehow we're going to believe this okay. We're going to rationalize this. I don't think we should rationalize any of it at all. I think we should say no. The press briefing will begin. I will bring it to you. Keep it here. I'm Tony Katz, and this is Tony Katz Today. Welcome back, Tony Katz. Tony Katz today. So I think the person took their spot in the new media seat. I have not applied yet. That's my fault. I have not applied for the new media seat. I should and go and sit down. Does radio count as new media? Aren't we like the oldest media? Right there. Oh, look at us. Look at us. It begins.
To see all of you. What we've witnessed President Trump accomplish over the last few days has been nothing short of remarkable. We are now 3.5 years into the war between Russia and Ukraine, a brutal conflict that has claimed hundreds of thousands of Russian and Ukrainian lives and cost trillions of dollars. The weakness and incompetence of Joe Biden foolishly allowed the killing to start in the first place. Until President Trump returned to office in January, the bloody and broken Biden status quo was to endlessly force American taxpayers to fund Ukraine no matter the cost, no matter how long it takes, and no matter how many lives were lost. There is no denying that Biden's America Last foreign policy moved the world further away from peace. President Trump rejected that failed approach and instead, over the last 7 months, has relentlessly pursued peace throughout his second term. And thanks to President Trump's efforts, we finally have movement after years of deadly gridlock. On Friday, as you all know, many of you were there, President Trump hosted Russian President Vladimir Putin in Anchorage, Alaska, for a bilateral meeting. This was the first time President Putin has been to the United States since 2015, and the first time he has met with an American president in years. President Putin publicly confirmed what President Trump has said all along. The war between Russia and Ukraine never would have started in the first place if President Trump were in office. This was always obvious to any person with a shred of common sense. Just look at what took place during the last 4 administrations. Under George W. Bush, Russia invaded Georgia. Under Barack Obama, Russia took Crimea. Under Joe Biden, Russia invaded Ukraine. But under President Trump, Russia did not invade nor take anything.
Tony Katz today. Good to be with you. It's Caroline Levitt. White House press briefing has begun. I will tell you that the fodder you're going to create for the left by saying President Putin said the war never would have happened if Trump was in office is going to get spun against you. That is not the way I would have started a press conference. That's not the way I would have done it. But of course, talking about Ukraine, talking about the meeting with Putin, talking about the meeting with Zelenskyy, talking about the meeting with European leaders. We take it to the press briefing right now.
As well as Ukrainian President Zelenskyy, they all traveled here to meet with President Trump to maintain the momentum and work toward a lasting peace. Across the board, every leader credited President Trump for his decisive leadership that has reignited the dialogue in hopes of finally bringing this war to a peaceful conclusion. 2 quotes in particular capture the progress that was made and the optimism moving forward. Finnish President Alexander Stubb said, "I think in the past 2 weeks, we've probably had more progress in ending this war than we have had in the past 3.5 years. Again, that is the president of Finland, a country that shares a border with Russia. That's what we call the President Trump effect. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte also summed it up well. Without President Trump, this deadlock with Putin would not have been broken. He is the only one who could do this." Following the encouraging conversations yesterday, President Trump spoke with President Putin by phone, and he agreed to begin the next phase of the peace process, a meeting between President Putin and President Zelenskyy, which would be followed, if necessary, by a trilateral meeting between President Putin, President Zelenskyy, and President Trump. As the president said, Vice President Vance, Secretary Rubio, and Special Envoy Witkoff will continue to coordinate with Russia and Ukraine to make this happen as soon as possible. It's very important to remember that before President Trump's landslide victory last November, there was no end in sight to this bloodshed. Now there may finally be light at the end of the tunnel and an opportunity for lasting peace. That's because President Trump is the peace president, and American leadership is back on the world stage. It should not be lost on anyone in this room that world leaders are coming right here to Washington, D.C. for help. While previous presidents have traveled halfway around the world to apologize for America, President Trump stands up for America, and he has firmly restored America's status as the undisputed leader of the free world.
That is such a punch in the face to Barack Obama and the apology tour starting in Cairo. I mean, that's the reference right there.
And his foreign policy accomplishments. From the beginning of this entire process, much of the left-wing media has been actively rooting against the president of the United States in the pursuit of peace.
That's fact.
Initially, the media ridiculously claimed that President Trump was somehow beholden to Russia for even agreeing to have a face-to-face discussion with President Putin inside of the United States.
Also,
the media said President Trump was making a grave mistake by, quote, legitimizing Putin. They were aghast that President Trump would treat another world leader like a world leader. The media relentlessly attacked President Trump and claimed he suffered a, quote, major defeat for not immediately emerging with a final agreement, even though he said heading into that meeting, this was a meeting to listen and to understand how to move the ball forward.
Now, wait a second. Wait.
Those historic U.S.
You said if there was no ceasefire, massive sanctions. So on that one, you can't win the argument. On everything else, Caroline Levitt is absolutely correct.
The so-called experts in the foreign policy establishment, whose record is nothing but endless wars, trillions of wasted taxpayer dollars, and dead Americans, have the nerve to try and lecture President Trump, who has solved 7 global conflicts in 7 months, about peace. This is the same president, by the way, who brokered the Abraham Accords in his first term, on top of more than half a dozen other peace deals this year alone, as I just said. We also saw yesterday the president of Ukraine and all of the other major leaders of Europe fly across the Atlantic Ocean to meet President Trump at the White House because of the progress that was made, and that, if you ask the media, failed meeting, but it was not. It was highly productive and it was successful. This is why Americans' trust in the mass media is at a lowest point in more than 5 decades. Diplomacy is a delicate process, and instead of reporting the facts about what is happening here at this White House and what is happening between this president and other leaders around the world, many outlets in this room continue to try to actively undermine the president and sabotage the efforts towards peace.
That's going to be taken as a scolding, like she's scolding the press. But Caroline Levitt is absolutely right. We said so earlier. We had this exact conversation.
DC safe again are working. There have been a total of 465 arrests since the start of this operation on Thursday, August 7th.
Now talking about what's happening in D.C.
There were a total of 52 arrests, including the arrest of an illegal alien MS-13 gang member with convictions for DWI and drug possession. Thanks to President Trump's leadership and the outstanding work of both federal and local law enforcement, dangerous gang members like the one picked up last night will not be allowed on the streets of our nation's capital. Other arrests last night included assault with a deadly weapon for stabbing, parole violation for robbery, murder, outstanding warrant for attempted murder, assault on federal law enforcement officer, and felony assault. 4 more homeless encampments were also removed during yesterday's reporting period. To date, a total of 48 homeless encampments have been cleared in Washington, D.C. by multi-agency teams. MPD patrol units are actively working with city officials to locate and clear additional encampments and remove homeless residents off of Washington's streets. And despite fake narratives from the media, again, a significant number of the arrests have been in high crime areas of D.C. In fact, nearly half of all of the non-illegal alien-related arrests have occurred in wards 7 and 8, the 2 wards that have the highest number of violent crime, as well as homicides and assaults with dangerous weapons last year. So while Democrats continue to coddle violent criminals, President Trump and this administration are focused on putting them behind bars and unapologetically standing up for the safety of law-abiding American citizens. And the White House will continue to provide all of you with the results of this operation in the days ahead. So with that, I will take your questions today. Here in our new media seat today, we have Jack Posobiec, who joined us in Anchorage, Alaska last week. Jack, thanks for being here. Why don't you kick us off?
Caroline, thanks so much. So a couple of questions regarding the status of these peace talks. Obviously, we saw the president and President Putin there in Anchorage. We saw the world leaders here yesterday with this summit. We've heard phrases like coalition of the willing. We've also heard Article 5-like guarantees. When it comes to the security guarantees, What is the current status of that? I know the president earlier today mentioned boots on the ground would be UK, France, Germany possibly, but unequivocally said no U.S. troops on the ground, but U.S. coordination. Can you elaborate on that, and what would the red lines be?
Sure. Well, you got to the heart of what I was going to say to all of you today on security guarantees, which is the president has definitively stated U.S. boots will not be on the ground in Ukraine, but we can certainly help in the coordination and perhaps provide other means of security guarantees to our European allies. The president understands security guarantees are crucially important to ensure a lasting peace, and he has directed his national security team to coordinate with our friends
I don't
in
think
Europe
she should
and
be
also
saying
to
that
continue
American
to
troops won't
cooperate
be on
and
the ground.
discuss
It's not that I
these
want them to be
matters
there.
with
I said
Ukraine
I
and
don't think
Russia as well.
we know that that's
The Russians
where it's going to
responded,
go to be
though.
able
I
to
know
guarantee
you're
that. I don't want her to have to walk back that
their
way.
response.
Right there, I
We've
would
heard
not have
some
said that.
reports from the Kremlin and others saying they're unequivocally against NATO troops on the ground.
Well, look, the president continues to have these conversations with both leaders. Those conversations took place in Anchorage, Alaska, again yesterday with the Europeans and President Zelenskyy, and he has directed his team to come up with a framework for these security guarantees that can be acceptable to help ensure a lasting peace and end this war.
And then just last question real quick on this. Regarding some of the funding, we're hearing questions about another round of weapons sales or possibly a round of U.S. purchases of Ukrainian drones. Will that money be funded by the U.S. taxpayers? Are we finally going to see an end to the U.S. taxpayer-funded, seemingly endless mandate for these foreign wars?
Well, the president is very sensitive to the needs of the American taxpayer, and immediately upon entering office back in January, he made it very clear that we're not going to continue writing blank checks to fund a war very far away, which is why he came up with the very creative solution to have NATO purchase American weaponry, because it is the best in the world to fund a war very far away, which is why he came up with the very creative solution to have NATO purchase American weaponry, because it is the best in the world, and then to backfill the needs of the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian people and their military. So that's the solution the president has came up with. We'll continue to see that forward. As for any additional sales, I'll have to defer you to the Department of Defense.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jack. Kelly.
What has President Trump learned that tells him that Vladimir Putin would be willing to make a deal for him, for President Trump?
Well, the president has learned a lot, which is part of the reason he opened up this dialogue. The previous administration, who oversaw the beginning of this war, refused to talk. And President Trump has always said, in order to learn, in order to move the ball forward with diplomacy and towards peace, you have to have open dialogue. And so that's why the president has had several conversations by phone and, of course, an in-person meeting last Friday with President Putin. He also has talked to President Zelenskyy dozens of times, had him here at the White House yesterday, and he's understanding what both sides want, what both sides are going to have to give up. And he has always said, in order to get a good deal, both sides are going to have to walk away a little bit unhappy. So he continues to learn a lot throughout these conversations, which is why we've seen progress from both sides. And I would also just add, when it comes to learning and moving the ball forward, look at how both Russia and Ukraine have actually talked directly for the first time in many years, thanks to the efforts of this president and this administration.
Specifically for President Trump, though, what do you think Putin's motivation is to try to do something for President Trump, as opposed to just resolving the conflict?
I think, as I just spoke to in my opening remarks, Kelly, Russia and all countries around this world actually respect the United States again, and the president is using the might of American strength.
And I think one of the answers to that question is that Russia has serious economic issues, and President Trump has alluded repeatedly to the concept of trade. So accepting less land and maybe holding off on any future invasions, because I think they will come. He is an expansionist guy. That is undeniable. And maybe able to get some trade, maybe being able to sell some oil again, things like that are more beneficial. And he's just got to wait his time out. We forget about the concept of patience in these things. But President Trump has talked about trade with Russia, and I think that's where the story is.
Between these three leaders. Can you explain how this went from a trilateral meeting involving President Trump to now the focus being on this bilateral meeting without the president first?
Well, look, the president has spoken to both leaders about this, and both leaders have expressed a willingness to sit down with each other. And so our national security team will help both countries do that. Ultimately, the president has always said that there are areas of disagreement in this war that will have to to be discussed and decided upon by these two countries. And so he wants these two countries to engage in direct diplomacy. He's said that from the very beginning, which is why he's agreeable to the idea of having President Zelenskyy and President Putin get together. And I understand accommodations for that meeting are underway. As soon as we hear more details, we'll be sure to let all of you know.
And just a quick follow-up. We know as of right now there is no ceasefire in place. We've seen Russia continue its attacks on Ukraine. What indications is the president getting from Putin that he wants to have this meeting with Zelenskyy soon?
Because he spoke to him directly yesterday.
And he expressed that
Haley,
sooner rather than later.
He spoke to that directly yesterday, and the president put that in his statement that he gave to all of you, the news media, knowing you'd be asking following that conversation in the effort of transparency. Haley.
Hey, thanks, Caroline.
The press conference.
Clear note U.S. boots on the ground. Is the president considering U.S. boots in the air as a form of a security guarantee?
Look, that was something the president mentioned on his interview this morning. It is an option and a possibility. I won't certainly rule out.
The question about boots on the ground, of course, is going to be the big one. There's going to be a question, as you just heard, about air. What kind of efforts are going to be taken? But I think it's a weird question from the press. You mean they're going to have a meeting and the president's not going to be there? If they were to agree to something, what is the argument? The president not there, so therefore it's a failure of the president. Oh wait, the president's there and it doesn't happen right away, so it's a failure of the positioning there is awkward, to say the least. I'm going to have more of the press conference on the other side. Keep it here. I'm Tony Katz. This is Tony Katz Today. Let's go back to it.
Discussed by our national security team right now with both parties.
I'm looking at your comments as well.
I just told you we'll provide you details as soon as we can. Thank you for trying, though. Libby.
Thank you, Caroline. I wanted to ask about the National Guard troops. How is the White House coordinating with how they're being placed in D.C., what areas? And then also, how long should people here in the district anticipate the National Guard to be on the ground patrolling the streets?
I don't have a timeline for you, Libby, but we will keep you posted on that. I think the president, as you know, and this administration, he came to this briefing room with members of his cabinet to lay out the rationale and the reasoning for federalizing the National Guard here in Washington, D.C., and for our work with the Metropolitan Police Department to make our district safer. We've seen violent crime has taken the lives of far too many residents here in our nation's capital, and the president wants to make it safe again. And as for the coordination efforts, this interagency team is meeting and talking daily. In fact, there's a meeting taking place right now in the West Wing with members of the interagency task force to continue to discuss not just the National Guard deployment, but also how we can continue to remove public safety threats off of the streets of Washington, which, as the numbers I just showed you prove, they are doing every single night. I will just reiterate, 465 total arrests and counting since the start of this operation. I believe 11 or 12 days ago. I'll have to check the calendar, but those are pretty remarkable results. If not for this task force and their high level of coordination and the leadership of this president, there would have been 465 more violent criminals on the streets of this capital that you all live in every day. So I think we should all be very grateful for that. Stephen.
The DC stuff is working. It's very hard to deny.
Sure.
First, I was wondering if you could clarify something President Trump said. He mentioned getting rid of the slums where criminals live. Was he talking about tents or permanent residential buildings? And then the mayor has expressed an interest in clarifying how much of a focus illegal immigration enforcement is as part of this crackdown. Can you say anything about that?
Sure.
And third, any preview on the beautification?
3 questions. I'll try to answer all 3 of them pointedly for you. First, when it comes to what you said, and the president said, the slums of Washington, D.C., he's referring to the most dangerous communities, neighborhoods, and streets in this city where, unfortunately, violence has ravaged these communities and taken the lives of, again, far too many law-abiding D.C. residents. We know on July 5th of this year, just more than a month ago, a 3-year-old beautiful young girl was shot and killed in her car with her family in one of these communities, which is why there has been a surge, despite what many of you have been falsely reporting. And I believe it was the Washington Post who put out a map claiming it to be fact-based when it was just based on, I don't know, accounts that they've heard on the street, not actual statistics and data. So we went and reconfigured the numbers. And as I said, nearly half of all the non-illegal alien-related arrests have occurred in wards 7 and 8 in the District of Columbia, where we know, excuse me, there's the highest rate of crime. So we'll continue to do that. And what was your second question, Stephen?
Legal immigration, how much of a focus that is?
Yeah, look, I mean,
I'm here to tell you that, and they're going to make the pivot soon, that much of this is, Republicans know how to handle crime. Democrats refuse to handle crime. And red state governors need to be taking a look at their blue cities and asking, what are we doing here? This is about modeling a behavior. We can do this. You can do this in your state because others refuse to do it. And that's the political. They refuse, so we did it. They're going to say you're overstepping. Doesn't matter. The people are going to say, thank goodness someone actually now cares about us. That's going to be the story. As long as we're within the limits of the law of that state. This is about modeling a behavior that other states can emulate. That's coming. You'll hear those talking points soon. Let's bring it back to the show and bring it back to the press briefing. White House press briefing continues. Tony Katz today. What's going on, everybody? Good to be with you. Live streaming there, the YouTubes, Tony Katz, Twitter X, Tony Katz, Facebook, Tony Katz Radio. And they're talking about D.C. and who they're arresting and the success that they're having. And I was just commenting to the live stream crowd that so much of what we're seeing about D.C. and the federalization of the police, et cetera, this is going to lead to a conversation that will come very soon about emulating. Hey, red state governors, see what we're doing? You've got these blue cities with these ridiculous mayors and these prosecutors who don't prosecute. You can take control of the situation to the extent that your state laws allow it and create a better opportunity. You can create safety and security. And this will show that Democrats not only refuse safety and security, they can't bring it. You can. So why don't you? That conversation is coming. Let's bring it back to Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, and the press briefing.
So much progress in the readout that was given to these European leaders immediately following his meeting with President Putin that every single one of them got on a plane 48 hours later and flew to the United States of America. And if I could just read for all of you some of the statements from those European leaders yesterday, you had President Zelenskyy himself saying it was a very good conversation. It was really good. We spoke about very sensitive points. The Secretary General, Mark Rutte, it was the president only because of the president that this deadlock was broken, but with President Putin by starting a dialogue. So these leaders who this war is in their backyard are very grateful that the president took that call and that he was there to provide them with a readout of Russia's thinking on this, something that was not done by the previous administration at all. Catherine.
Thank you. Is the White House looking at Budapest as a possible location?
I'm not going to confirm or deny locations. We'll provide you with details as soon as we can.
Following up on Kristen's question, I understand that the White House is working and allies are working to make this meeting happen, but did Putin promise to do a meeting with Zelenskyy, a direct meeting, in the coming weeks?
He has, and I just answered that question for you. Franco.
Thanks. I just want to clarify. So you are saying that President Trump is considering U.S. pilots and U.S. aircraft potentially supporting European or Ukrainian forces?
The president spoke to that himself this morning when he called into Fox and Friends, and I would defer you to his answer. You can read it directly yourself.
In addition, can I ask, no boots on the ground, Steve Witkoff's talking about Article 5-like security guarantees. Can you talk about what other Article 5-like security guarantees that are being considered if it's not boots on the ground?
These are very sensitive diplomatic discussions that are currently taking place literally as we speak. So I will leave it to the national security team, and I'll leave it to the president to have those private discussions with these leaders.
And she's right to avoid that part of the conversation.
Mary Margaret, go ahead.
There's going to be a whole bunch of talk about. You mean we're going to have pilots in the air?
These meetings, I know you
Russia's
said
going to
that
have
the
pilots in the air.
If
That's going to come
necessary.
up.
Do you think that we might not need the trilateral and that Zelenskyy and Putin might come to this conclusion on their own? And then as a follow-up, I know the president said on Fox News this morning that he's partially seeking peace in order to get to heaven. Was he joking, or is there spiritual motivation behind his peace deals here?
I think the president was serious. I think the president wants to get to heaven, as I hope we all do in this room as well. Annie.
Thanks, Caroline. I'm just shifting gears to the Department of Justice for a minute. Can you walk us through why another deputy FBI director was named? Does Trump have any displeasure with how the FBI has been being run to date?
Good question.
And I have a question about the antitrust debate.
No, Andrew Bailey is extremely qualified. As you know, he's been serving with honor as the Attorney General of Missouri, and he's been brought on as another set of very credible and experienced hands to work alongside the current Deputy Director, Dan Bongino, under the leadership of the Director, Kash Patel, and the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. And the FBI has been doing a tremendous job. We've seen their agents out on the streets as part of this interagency task force here in Washington. But the crime that they've been stopping here in Washington, they've been doing this for 7 months all across the country. In fact, there's been 19,000 arrests by the FBI nationwide. That's more than double last year in the same time period. Of those, 1,600 arrests were for violent crimes against children. 4,000 child victims have been rescued by this FBI under this current leadership. 1,000 arrests from investigations of foreign terrorist organizations. There's been 1,500 kilos of fentanyl seized. 6,300 kilos of meth have been seized. And 3 of the top 10 most wanted have been arrested so far. Not a single one of the individuals on the top 10 most wanted list were arrested under the previous administration. We've arrested 3 in 7 months. So when you're actually working and enforcing law and order, you need all hands on deck. And so we look forward to welcoming Andrew Bailey to this new post.
That was a pivot, and I have to take umbrage with it. This is the story of Andrew Bailey, who I know very little about, the Attorney General of Missouri. I don't have a single thing against the man. I don't know his track record in Missouri. I don't know how things are going there. He has been brought in to be the deputy director of the FBI, the co-deputy director, along with Dan Bongino. Dan Bongino was so disgusted, quite obviously, regarding the non-release of the Epstein files, he clearly threatened to quit. He was out of his head about it. There was a blow-up between him and Pam Bondi about it. He was convinced to stay. That seems obvious, and now you're bringing in somebody to be the co. I have not spoken to Dan about this. I don't speak to Dan on any level of daily basis or non-daily basis. We've spoken before. We've done interviews before. We've chatted before. I have certainly been supportive of him. Dan Bongino will be back on the radio in 6 months. That's my bet. This is absolutely, in my view, transitional. This is Dan Bongino heading out. This is, I can't answer if pushed out, but I'm sorry, you cannot sell me on this is all hands on deck. You can't do it. You gave Bailey the same position as Bongino after Bongino clearly was disgusted regarding the lack of release of the Epstein files and the total backtracking on that from Bondi at all. Nope. No. You can't sell me on the idea that it's all hands on deck. That might be the line, but that's not the answer. The answer, I'm betting it. I'm laying down my marker. Dan Bongino in 6 months is out and back on the air. And in my estimation, if Dan Bongino had quit, that guy would be celebrated as a hero in ways it is hard to fathom. And I cannot wait for his stories when he returns. That was a line. I think Caroline Leavitt does a very, very good job. But that was a line right there. My take. Back to the press conference.
So I know he's very proud of all of these achievements, and I know he's very honored to serve as the President of the United States and to restore peace around this world. Go ahead.
So you mentioned Armenia and Azerbaijan. That's a conflict that, I spent time in the Southern Caucasus covering that. And, a conflict of over 30 years, and he resolved it in just a couple of months. Mm-hmm. Are there other conflicts that the president's working on right now that are off the radar screen that we should be tracking?
In fact, there are many. The State Department is always working around the clock under the leadership of Secretary Rubio and keeping the president apprised of conflicts that are bubbling up all over the world. But of course, as you all know, as we've talked a lot about in this briefing, he's spending a lot of time right now on ending this war in Russia-Ukraine, and of course the conflict in Israel and Gaza, which he wants to see come to a close as well. Sure, go ahead.
So the president said that he's starting a movement to eliminate mail-in voting, but states administer elections, not federal federal authorities. So can you provide any more details about how the White House plans to eliminate that?
The White House continues to work on this, and when Congress comes back to Washington, I'm sure there will be many discussions with our friends on Capitol Hill and also our friends in state legislatures across the country to ensure that we're protecting the integrity of the vote for the American people. And I think Republicans generally and the president generally wants to make it easier for Americans to vote and harder for people to cheat in our elections. And it's quite mind-boggling that the Democrat Party could stand in opposition to common sense. He wants to ensure election integrity. There were great efforts that were made in 2024. Stand in opposition to
I won't get ahead of myself
what would they stand for Hatch Act reasons to get ahead for the next election. But I can assure you this is a priority for the president. Go ahead.
If I could just follow up on your comments about Gaza.
Sure.
There was a ceasefire proposal put forward by both Qatar and Egypt. Hamas accepted it on Monday. Israel has yet to officially weigh in. I'm wondering if the U.S. was at all involved in it, if it's supportive of it, and whether or not the president believes Israel should accept it.
I don't think it's a coincidence that Hamas accepted this proposal after the President of the United States posted a very strong statement about this conflict on Truth Social yesterday. I would refer you back to that statement. As for this proposal that Hamas has now accepted, the United States continues to discuss it, and I'll let the President weigh in on it definitively. You're welcome. Sure.
Can you describe the president's perspective on taking a stake in Intel in exchange for federal grants? And is this
I brought this up earlier. Thrilled. I knew this question was coming.
With other semiconductor companies and manufacturing companies?
Well, the president, he's been very clear about the need to reshore manufacturing that's critical to our national and economic security. That is especially in regards to chips and semiconductors, which is why the president has initiated the Commerce Department to conduct a study on semiconductors, a Section 232 investigation, so we can ultimately implement tariffs, and it's why our export license requirements remain in place as well. As for this 10% government stake deal, the Department of Commerce continues to work on it. I know Secretary Lutnick is working on it and ironing out the details, but the president wants to put America's needs first, both from a national security and economic perspective, and it's a creative idea that has never been done before to ensure that we're both reshoring these critical supply chains while also gaining something of it for the American taxpayer.
I'm not sure how an investment into Intel of 10%, the United States taking a 10% stake, is any different than Solyndra, and that's going to need to be explained. It does not hit the ear well at all. More of the press conference as it goes on, more to get to. Keep it here. I'm Tony Katz. This is Tony Katz Today. All right. The radio show is in break. We're going to keep going with this. This to me is like the most fun of the gig, Jim. To be able to share the stuff and then comment on the stuff. Oh, like I know that other hosts don't do it, and they're not specifically wrong. Oh, the press conference is over. She's done. She's done. That was quick. That was 30 minutes. That was in, out, and done right there. That's very, very interesting. I want to be able to bring this stuff to you. I want to be able to share this stuff with you for sure. Hang loose, guys. Kick back, relax. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Tony Katz. Tony Katz today. Good to be here. Glad you guys are here. Make sure you subscribe on the YouTube channel. Just do that. I'd greatly appreciate it as we build up a lot of people with bigger audiences and subscribers, and we're just trying to make our way, trying to build it up, grow. Glad you're here. And if you're on Twitter X, be sure to follow. I appreciate that as well. I see the comments there. And yeah, I had heard this in the presser that the White House is looking at Budapest for peace talks. I don't know. I don't know if Budapest sends the message. I just am not sure. It won't be any place. I mean, I was going to say it won't be any place in Europe, but of course that is. So we'll see. Let's see where else we are. Yeah, I can't see that link. All right. You got it. All right, come back to the show. It's a good cigar. Brick House, Maduro from JC Newman. The watch, that's Fletterman Von Riest right there. Use promo code CATS at vonriest.com to get your discount. Love these timepieces. Thrilled to be working with them. Look at it. That is their chrono. That is the Rudin record. Love it. Comes in different colors too, but I dig this right here. The Lone Star lockup. It is coming. The Lone Star lockup is like Alligator Alcatraz or the Speedway Slammer, and it is going to be at Fort Bliss in Texas. 1,000 beds. It's going to hold. I was going to say hold, and somehow I forgot to say that. It sounded like I was choking. It's going to hold 1,000 beds. A plan to expand to 5,000 beds by 2027. If there's ever been a conversation to which the Democrats lost the plot early, it's that they could have done so much in Biden's 4 years to keep the country safe, and they chose not to. It was a choice. And all their anger and frustration, remember when they were storming areas and who are you holding? We have the right to oversight. We demand to look. And you had a congressman from New Jersey, McIver, who was cuffed. I think she should have been thrown out of the House for her actions in attacking ICE agents. The mayor of Newark and others, they lost the plot. They lost the story. Americans are in favor of not allowing illegal immigrants to have carte blanche and the arrest of criminals. Illegal immigrant criminals. Absolutely. And Americans favor this and see the success and see the value. And they say, good, and it's about time. And this conversation about will, remember President Trump in that address to a joint session of Congress, it wasn't actually the State of the Union, it was just an address to a joint session. You didn't need new laws, you just needed a new president. And it was a laugh line, except it was remarkably profound. That is all it took. But more to the point, the voting for President Trump over Kamala Harris was the conversation of the will. We wanted something different. We could not go on as we were. And when you watch that maneuver, when you watch the cleaning up of regulations, when you watch the cutting of spendings, I want to see many, many more rescission bills, and I'm bothered that I haven't seen more yet. The clawing back of spending and putting an end to those appropriations. This is about will. Look what you can do if you simply decide to do it. This lesson, this story, I think, is a huge part of 2026, these midterms going into 2028. We're willing to do the hard work. They're willing to let you suffer and die. We're willing to do the work to remove criminals off the street. They don't care that you live in fear. They don't care that your cities turn to squalor. That conversation, see how easily that I said that? See how easily that's done in less than 30 seconds? See how easy of a statement that is and how easy it is to comprehend and understand it. That, to me, has to be a huge driver for Republicans. Now, on the economics, if we don't see rate cuts, if we don't see some serious moves on the bringing down of prices on a bunch of things, that's going to be a problem. But there's still time on that. What they're doing now, that's got to be a major driving force because it is motivating as all get out. This is Tony Katz today. Guys, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here. So very much. And I only hope you'll be there this Saturday. That is August 23rd. Tickets.tonykatz.com. Myself and actor Nick Searcy from Hollywood to the Heartland. Stories of Hollywood, stories of DC, and Nick's creating of 2 documentaries regarding January 6th and the madness that he saw, the politics that he saw, and then his move to the Midwest. It's going to be a fantastic night of bourbon, barbecue, cigars, and you. I hope to see you there. Tickets.tonykatz.com. Get your tickets. Be a part of it. Come join us. It's going to be a great time. It's going to be a fantastic, fantastic night. Tickets.tonykatz.com. Guys, can't thank you enough for being here. Don't forget to follow in all the places on YouTube, Tony Katz, Twitter X, Tony Katz, Instagram, Tony Katz, and Facebook, Tony Katz Radio. The radio show continues over at WIBC.com. So you want to make sure you head over there and you listen to the rest of the show as it continues. I appreciate you guys, and I will catch you tomorrow. Y'all be good. Take care.